So up next, I'm not sure if following Rick is going to be easy, but if anybody can do it, it's our next speaker. His name is Mark Hawkins. I met Mark many moons ago. He was a client of ours, and I have always looked at Mark as one of my inspirational stories. He has come such a long way from the man who first came into my office. I don't know how many years ago, a decade and a half ago, I think. And he has grown and flourished and had pain and has surmounted it. And he's got a wonderful story. It's a story full of hope, and it's also a story that we all need to hear because we often forget the amount of pain that survivors go through, and getting over some of it and being able to tell a story has made such a difference to Mark's life. So I want to introduce you to Mark Hawkins. He is a recipient of the Queen's Jubilee Medal, something of that nature, something big. He's spoken at lots of different police organizations with regards to trying to help the police become a little bit better at this. And he's always been a really huge supporter of ours. And thank you, Mark, because you're one of the people that I look to when I have a bad day going, okay, why am I doing this? It's people like you, so thank you.
Thanks, Simona.
Thank you.
Let's get a quick drink of water. Anyways, thank you, Simona. As Simona said, my name is Mark Hawkins. I'm going to tell you my story. It's involving the Catholic Church. I was abused by a Catholic priest, so I don't want to hammer the Catholic Church, but in my situation, they handled it wrong, and many other young boys and girls. Anyways, I grew up in downtown Toronto, the Logan and Gerrard area, if you know that area. My parents had a few children, 5 boys, 5 girls. I was the youngest of 5 boys. I had 2 younger sisters, but big Catholic family. I had 2 uncles that were priests and one that was a deacon. So the church was really influential in our lives. The church I went to was just around the corner from our house. It was on First Avenue, straight at Gerrard, just east of Broadview. And that's where we grew up. And I went to St. Anne's School. The church was called St. Anne's, and the school was called St. Anne's. So that's where I grew up. And I think my mom wanted me to be a priest, but Father Mark never became Father Mark. So having 10 children, my childhood was great. I was a hyper young child, never got in trouble at school. And it was about in grade 4 that my life changed. We had this new priest come to our church. His name was Father John O'Donnell. He was fairly young back then, probably early 40s. He was the pastor, and we had an associate pastor. His name was Father Vandenberg, and he was just such a great priest. So that's why I don't like to hammer all of them. He was great. He moved on to go to Newmarket. But Father O'Donnell, remember it was the springtime when he came, and my mom invited me. I had to go to church. You had to go to church every Sunday. So I think I had baseball or something Sunday, so we had to go Saturday. Well, Father O'Donnell was the priest. And back then, the service was really quick. It was like 40 minutes. And if you're Catholic, that's pretty quick. So I said to my mom, I really like Father O'Donnell. I want to come to his masses all the time. Mass ended. My mom introduced me to him. Slowly, that's where I think that's when he targeted me as one of his victims, because there was other boys as well. So shortly after that, I became an altar boy. And the way he grew me, he did 2 things. He grew my parents, because my parents loved him. He'd come to our house, and back then, this is in the 70s. Back then, he would come to our house after Mass, which was only like a 2 or 3 minute walk, and sit and have tea with my parents. And my parents were active in the church, and they had got married at that church, and my grandparents got married there. So it was really influential in our family. And having the priest come was the best. So they loved him right from day one. And being a hyper child, my Father O'Donnell started helping us out, and I started spending a lot of time with him. I became an altar boy, and I basically became the altar boy for him. And slowly, what I realized as I got older, he he was very touchy feely, and he slowly made it normal that he'd always hugging me or had his arm around me. Um, what happened was, I remember the first time I got abused. I was pretty young. He invited me to dinner, and I mean, when you have 10 siblings and mom and dad, 12 of us at a table, that's a lot. We're fighting for food, you know. And so I go to the rectory, and it's funny. I see it today, and it's not big, but back then I thought I was at the Last Supper. There was me and one other priest and Father O'Donnell, and somebody was serving us food, and it was like wonderful. After that, he took me up to his room, and he had a TV in his room, which was very. There wasn't a lot of people that had TVs. They were just they were expensive. Anyways, that was the first. And I was really so. I'm about 10 years old at this point, and this is in the. He came in the spring. This would be the start of the grade 4, and I was really fascinated by the wine that they use during communion and this miracle that happened. And that was the first time I got introduced to alcohol, was from Father O'Donnell. And that night he kind of normalized everything, and this is what adults do to kids. And he fondled me that night, and I went home after, and I felt really uncomfortable and really embarrassed. Slowly I noticed it's not normal for a 40-year-old man to be hanging around a 10-year-old kid. A red flag should have went up, but it continued. And I remember shortly after that, coming from a big family, my mom was raising all 10 of us, and my dad was working for the Toronto Hydro back then, and Father O'Donnell started taking me places. And remember this one time he was taking me for ice cream, and we came down out of the parking lot. And he asked me, there was 2 young girls playing on the street. He asked me, are you getting excited? I had no idea what he was talking about. I said, no, I can't stand girls. I have 2 younger sisters that used to drive me crazy. And my future wife that lived across the street, the 3 of them would gang up on me and move all my stuff. And I think I had a little bit of OCD back then, so they kind of moved my shoes around and kind of messed around with me. So no, I didn't like girls back then. So he took me to the movies, and it started with voyeurism. He'd want to watch me urinate, and he'd do that. And he always and it's weird. And one of the things I tell people is I was abused by him for about 4 years. And I remember some of the things that really trigger, like with Father O'Donnell, he had this bad body odor. And I remember his name was John O'Donnell. I should stop calling him Father O'Donnell. But anyways, I could be in a grocery store sometimes, and I'm now 60 years old, 62, shoot. And you smell someone in front with bad body odor, and it's triggering. And I tell people that. I remember he took me camping once, and I was a little older. My brother was with us. He was also the Boy Scout leader, too. And we had to go to Boy Scouts, and I remember he tried to rape me, and it was in Huntsville, and I was really sick at the time. It was a Friday night, and I had to sleep in his tent, which is wrong in itself. And he tried to sexually rape me that night, and I was so sick, and he ended up having to take me home the next day. I got home, and my mom was cooking banana bread this day, and to this day, going to Starbucks or anything, I see the word banana bread, it triggers me. I ended up going to Sick Kids. I ended up with shingles back then, which is really young for like a 10 or 11-year-old to have shingles. Still have a huge scar on my back from it. Another time, so what would happen was, as I was in school at St. Anne's, there'd be a funeral at the church, and he'd call the principal of the school. I don't even know if they called my parents. And he'd say, I need Mark to come up and serve at the funeral. And so I'd go up the street, and it seemed to be on Tuesdays and Thursdays all the time. But anyways, I'd have to be the altar boy for the funeral. And then I would go in his car to the gravesite, which was up at Yonge and Highway 7, the Catholic cemetery up there. but he would fondle me all the way up. And he always wore these Adidas shorts. And as he got more and more comfortable, he kept blaming me, saying I was getting him excited. So I remember, and this is the other thing, from grade 4 on, my marks started to really slip in school, behavior issues, couldn't sit still. So he would always wear these god-awful white Adidas shorts and these white Gazelle shoes, Nike Adidas. He'd always wear that. A lot of people started to think he was my dad because we spent so much time together. He came to a number of my baseball games as I got into my early teens. So that would happen. I'd go back to school and I couldn't focus and I was struggling at school. I couldn't sit still. I'd be and I started to realize I ruminated a lot. And I started to always try to think, how am I not going to make them excited? So I kept putting the blame on me. As I got a little bit older, I was about 11, me and my brother John, who's a couple of years, he was aware of it, like not aware, but knew Father O'Donnell liked young boys. And me and my brother and this one other boy from his previous church, we would have to clean the hall where they had a hall in the basement there. And this one time, so my brother, I guess, had an argument with the priest, and my brother stopped going, and I was having to help. And if your parents said, Mark, Father O'Donnell needs you up at the church to clean the hall, you're going up. You have no choice. So I would do that. And then he was going to teach me, Father O'Donnell was going to teach me how to shut all the lights off in the church. A lot of I found out later in my life from my brother John that a lot of the sexual assaults that happened, there was only rooms that me and him could go in. And this one time, so he's going to show me, and we're in the back of behind where the men's and women's washroom, there's a boiler room. And Father O'Donnell said to me one day, he said, I'm going to show you how to shut the lights off. Your brother John's not here anymore. And so he took me back there and showed me where the panel was to shut the lights off. There's 2 breaker panels. So I learned that. And there was a chair there, a wooden chair with orange legs. And it's funny, the detail I can remember. And it was a Sunday, and he tried to rape me that day and tried to penetrate me. And I remember being in so much pain. And I ran home afterwards, and I had ripped my pants, and I had got home. My mom was in the kitchen, and I remember saying to my mom, I hate Father O'Donnell, I hate him. And in the Catholic religion, the word hate's not a good word to use. You're better off using the F-bomb. So anyways, I got sent to my room, and what happened was on Sundays, if he sexually assaulted me, he would come shortly after just to check up on me to make sure I wasn't going to say anything to my parents. That's what I'm assuming now. So I'd go up, I'd put the dresser by my door so he couldn't get in, and I'd look out the window, and I could see him coming down the street the way our window was. And he'd be coming down the street in this particular day, and I was so mad. And I remember taking a knife from my kitchen and going upstairs. And at this point in my life, I just couldn't stop. I was so angry at myself for making him do these things to me. I tried to cut my wrist, and I couldn't do it. So I ended up smashing the windows with my fist, and I ended up cutting my wrist wide open. And I ended up going to Sick Kids, and my dad was doing volunteer work for the church at the time. And my mom and a neighbor drove me to the hospital, and my wrist was cut wide open. And I remember the doctor talking to me, and sure enough, who came in was Father O'Donnell. And anyways, nothing happened from that. I ended up on medication. I spent most of my life on medication. And I tried to bury, as I got older in my teen years, I was playing sports, and sports to me was an escape from it, escape from the abuse. I started picking up really bad habits, bad coping mechanisms in high school, whether it was drinking, smoking weed, just self-medicating basically, because the pain was too much, and I just wanted it to go away. I wanted to bury it and never think about it again. I ended up at a Catholic high school, Neil McNeil, the first year there was 2 priests, and they weren't pedophiles, I don't think, but they would I always thought they wanted to try to have sex with me. So I didn't do very well there. I ended up leaving there, and I went to another public school, and I struggled there, and then went to another school, and eventually I graduated from high school before I was too old, and my life started to change. I said, you know what, I'm not going to party anymore. I'm not going to self-medicate. I'm going to take care of myself. I went on to college and got a job and ended up marrying that girl that used to drive me crazy, and we had 2 lovely children that are both doing really well in life. And so as I'm now in my early 20s, and I got married in the church where I was abused, which is kind of crazy when I think about it. And I used to think, Father O'Donnell used to tell me if I told people that we were doing this, that God would tell him. And I could never figure out how he knew so much, but I realized we all had to go to confession every week, and my parents do, and that's what I think, how he knew everything. And by that time, as I got a little bit older, he was giving me money and taking me to movies and stuff my parents couldn't do. And so in some ways I really liked him. In other ways I wanted to kill him, but I blamed myself for it. As I got a bit older, I always knew when he was going to try to abuse me. And this one time I was cutting grass. I was about 12 years old. I think I was in grade 7 and 8. And also, this is the craziest thing. In grade 7 and 8, everybody, the boys in the school knew that he was like this. And that Father O'Donnell was like this. They called him all kinds of bad names. And I got teased a lot, too, a lot of homophobic names and stuff like that. People, because I was with him all the time, me and one other boy. And this one time I'm cutting the grass, and Father O'Donnell comes out, and I got the lawnmower, and he started talking inappropriately to me. And I thought, okay, he's going to try to abuse me. So I took the lawnmower, I dropped it on my foot on purpose, and it ripped my foot up, and I had to go to East General Hospital that time. So, but that's how hard I was trying not to get him to sexually abuse me, because it became so regular, and my parents didn't know I didn't want to get in trouble. He used to threaten me with 311 Jarvis, which was a youth detention center. I saw myself as the perpetrator. I saw myself as the person that was making him do these things to me. So I get married, everything's good, but you know, the pain and I struggled with trusting people. I never trusted people. I had marriage problems because I would spend days just ruminating and trying to change the picture and trying to I wanted help, but I didn't know where to go. And first place I went was Catholic services, because I still went to church. I still practiced the religion. It was like my mom had died when I was pretty young, I think 22 or 23. My dad was suffering from dementia, and I didn't know what to do. And so I called them, and I told them my situation, and they said, it's a supply. They didn't have any services. Supply and demand. It doesn't really happen to boys, very often. So that never worked out. I ended up meeting through EAP through work. I had a great job. I worked for the city. I managed parks for Toronto. I'm retired now, but I met a really good therapist through our EAP program, who was also from South America and Catholic, and understood Catholicism and what I was going through. And but the problem was you only get so many sessions, and so I didn't know where to go after that, because I was really struggling. My wife didn't know why I was. She knew the priest as well, so it was kind of an awkward situation, because he had this great reputation. So I finally find an organization called the Canadian Centre for Abuse Awareness out of Newmarket, Ontario. And they had a program called A Time for Men, and it was for male survivors. Most of them it was through Ken Dryden. He was with the Toronto Maple Leafs. A lot of them were survivors of Maple Leaf Gardens. So I ended up going to that program. I met a wonderful counselor there who was formerly an addiction counselor, and she ended up doing male survivor stuff. And dealing with males who are surviving abuse, because when she was doing addiction, she was saying so many men are relapsing, and the root problem was they were abused or had trauma in their lives. So I ended up meeting her, and that was really good. And I was doing one-on-one counseling with her. And at the same time, I wanted to charge him. So I went through this period because they moved him. The abuse stopped at the end of between grade 9 and 10. He moved out to Bramalea, and then he called me one day. I went to a movie with him, and then he tried to abuse me. And then I told him some profanities, and that was the last time I ever seen him until my mom's funeral. He ended up, so I ended up meeting this woman, and I was getting counseling. It was expensive back then. It was $125. It's a lot more now, I'm sure, but back then that was a lot of money. And my counselor, Lynn McDonnell, she was really great, and she suggested, Mark, let's write to the church. How do you feel about writing to the diocese and asking for some support? But okay, my uncles were in the Toronto diocese. So they get back to us, and they want to interview me. So they have a judicial vicar who is sometimes the person is trained as a lawyer. And he came in and he interviewed me. It was probably a mistake. He interviewed me and my brother John, who had witnessed some of it. He interviewed me, and he was friends with my uncle. He knew my uncle. And I remember him, he asked me if he penetrated me, and I said no, and I didn't want to tell him the whole story, because even when I met Simona, I think I told her slowly, because there's a trust thing, and I don't know for yourselves, but I try to explain to people, if you have this secret that nobody knows, you might have done something when you were young that was really stupid and you don't want people to know. And now all of a sudden you're showing that secret to somebody you don't even know. It takes a lot of guts to do it. So anyways, I got it. Shortly after that, they said, yeah, they're going to pay for my counseling. And I was great. I remember when he asked me if if he raped me and penetrated me. I said no, and then he said, well, that's good. It wasn't something like that, oh, that's good then. It's not that bad. He said, yeah, Father O'Donnell was weird. We knew he was a bit weird. That's not weird. That's a pedophile. So anyways, he got moved. They retired him at a really young age, because at 58 or 59, they retired him because he was moved out to Scarborough with another pedophile priest from Edmonton that was convicted. And then they retired both. The one went to jail and he got retired. I would go by the police station and at 55 Division. This went on for about 2 years, and I was really afraid to tell the police. I just didn't want to go through what you heard this morning, and I didn't want to be, somehow I just thought he would twist it so I would be the perpetrator. Somehow I was going to be blamed. And I was struggling because I was self-hurting myself. I showered for hours, like 5 and 6 times a day. And he had me so paranoid growing up, I would run everywhere. My brother called me Forrest Gump. I was running everywhere because I thought I'd be followed, and that he had this power over me. And he had it my whole life until I started getting treatment and realizing, hey, that this wasn't your fault. The shame should be on him. So I ended up going to Canadian Centre for Abuse and Awareness, and by the time I wanted to charge Father O'Donnell, the police told me he was deceased. I did get interviewed by the OPP. I got to tell you, they were wonderful. A lot better than what I've heard here. They interview people in like a living room type setting, a very comfortable setting, and they're really good at, well, my experience was good. So, but anyways, he was deceased, so I couldn't do anything but put a note on his gravestone up at 7-Eleven that he was a pedophile. Anyway, so I thought, well, shortly after that, I get a letter from the Catholic Church saying that, Mark, if you take civil action against us, we're going to cut off your funding for your treatment, and we're going to excommunicate you from the church. that got me upset. So Canadian Center for Abuse Awareness referred me to a lawyer named Loretta Merritt. Really nice lady. Talked to her on the phone. Loretta, unfortunately, her firm was representing the Catholic Church, this diocese in another area. So she referred me to this wonderful lawyer, Simona Jelinek. And I went and met Simona at her office and her wonderful staff who's sitting over there a number of years ago. And I went with my wife and I was really nervous. So now I'm telling Simona, and she was wonderful, and I took a lot, and I was pretty, I don't know, I was probably a mess. But she had this wonderful dog, Gaston, a French bulldog, which I really loved. Yeah, so that was a great experience. And Simona, I remember this to this day. She said, Mark, there's three things you can do. You can do nothing, you could go to Criminal Compensation Board, you can go to the police, you can civilly sue, or you can do absolutely nothing, but it's your choice. So I didn't feel pressured to do anything. So we met that day, and I left there. I felt so good. I felt so much better. I felt like someone believed me. I felt like someone that was going to stick up for me and help me out, because it took a long time. And the other thing, Simona wanted to make sure I was getting good counseling, and I was. And because I was diagnosed with so many mental health disorders, and finally a trauma specialist at CAMH diagnosed me with complex PTSD. So I was getting good counseling, and I went on a number of different medications, and so to this day I'm doing so much better. I grew a lot. I didn't really plan on speaking. I remember the first time I met my counselor, I said to her, I thought it was like penicillin. You take 10 pills for 2 weeks, and 10, how many sessions will it take to make me better and normal again? Because I never felt normal. What's normal? But anyways, I said to her, how many times do I have to come, Lynn? I said, like, is it like an antibiotic? I see you 10 times and I'm fixed? Didn't work like that. I spent a number of years getting counseling, and then group therapy. I ended up on a group, and I said, Lynn, I really don't want to go in a group, but like, I'm normal. I got a job and I'm doing fine. And sure enough, when I went in the group, it was people from all walks of lives, and realized, hey, this doesn't discriminate against people. I mean, my group had Maple Leaf Garden survivors to police officers. But I learned a lot from them, and I started to realize, hey, what I'm experiencing, trust, anxiety, all these things that I'm experiencing, somebody else has experienced the same thing. And I was doing Lynn also did volunteer work with this group called malesurvivor.org. It's out of the United States, and psychologists across the states volunteer their time to work with male survivors. So I did a few sessions of that, a few weekends of that, and that was really intense and good. And eventually I got called, and Lynn asked me if I would speak, and I did it a few times. The OPP ran these courses around Ontario called Understanding and Responding to Male Victimization. And so there was myself, another friend of mine, Bruce, who was abused by a doctor here in Toronto, who was also a basketball coach. And then a friend, Jordan, who was abused by a step uncle and ended up prostituting here in Toronto. He's from Orangeville. And then a residential school survivor, Bob. And the four of us would speak across the province and tell our stories, and did that. And then one day I got a call from a member of my wife. She said, Mark, Oprah Winfrey show's producers calling you. I said, well, somebody playing a joke. Anyways, I ended up, it was Oprah Winfrey show, and she did a show for 200 men. I don't know if anyone's seen it, but it's with Tyler Perry and her, and I was on that show. And at that point, everybody knew then that, because I kept it a secret. I didn't really want people to know, because one of the reasons was I thought it would affect my job. I thought it would change people's perspective of me, because I could hide it in the public really good. At home, I'd be a mess. I'd be alone, and I was just thinking about it, and I just didn't want people to know. I'm older now, and I have this little video that I like to show. It's some quotes I really like, and 3 people that really inspired me, and some pictures of me during that time when I was being sexually abused. That's the church. That was Photoshopped. That doesn't say that on that sign. My son. But this is the church, St. Anne's, and here's my video.
Worn out
That's really nice
places,
hair back then.
worn out
That's
faces.
about 9. This is when it started.
Bright and early for the daily races, going nowhere, going nowhere. Their tears are filling up their glasses. No expression, no expression. Hide my head, I wanna drown my sorrow. No tomorrow, no tomorrow. And I find it kind of funny, I find it kind of sad. The dreams in which I'm dying are the best I've ever had. I find it hard to tell you, I find it hard to take. When people run in circles, it's a very, very mad world. Mad world. Children waiting for the day they feel good. Happy birthday, happy birthday. And to feel the way that every child should sit and listen, sit and listen. Went to school and I was very nervous. No one knew me, no one knew me. Hello teacher, tell me what's my lesson. Look right through me, look right through me. And I find it kind of funny, I find it kind of sad. The dreams in which I'm dying are the best I've ever had. I find it hard to tell you, I find it hard to take. When people run in circles, it's a very, very mad world. Mad world. Enlarging your world.
Thank you so much for listening to my story. Thanks, Simona.